Hi guys, so just to give you a quick lowdown of my personal history with Terrifier. So I started with the horror anthology All Hallows Eve, in which Art makes his movie debut. That's an anthology film, and Art is in one or two of the segments. It's a pretty decent film. I've still got a copy of it in my cupboard somewhere. On the strength of that, I watched Terrifier 1 not long afterwards, and that's when I hit a snag with this whole thing. It was actually one of my earliest reviews on the channel. It was like episode 13 or something like that, but I think I only gave it like 2.5 out of 5. And my biggest problem with it was one particular kill where this girl is hanging upside down and Art just saws her in half. I found it to be one of the most vile things I've ever seen on screen. Like, it made my stomach turn, and I just came out of that film thinking that this franchise wasn't for me. I prefer the safer things like Halloween. I didn't give it any more thought for years, and then I watched Terrifier 2 on a whim. I just randomly put it on one afternoon when I was off work, and this is when I became a fan suddenly, because I think 2 is a wonderful film. It just works on so many levels. It's not just the horror. It works as a drama film. It's got great themes and characters and great fantasy elements. I just think it's absolutely fantastic, number 2. Plus, there was nothing in the second one which offended me in the same way as that kill from the first film. And actually, now that I've seen the third film, there's nothing in the third one that offends me in any way either. It seems to be just that one kill from Terrifier 1. So at some point, I'm going to have to go back to that original, and maybe that kill will play better for me second time around. Or maybe I'll just cover my eyes for 5 seconds or whatever. So this time around we've got a Christmas theme, and I had completely forgotten that Art gets beheaded at the end of Terrifier 2, because they've had to do some narrative gymnastics to get the character back together at the start of this. He spends quite a bit of time crossing town headless. He's literally walking around with no head. He goes on the subway, and it turns out his head is in the middle of an insane asylum, bizarrely. But this section of the movie is damn creepy, actually. It was one of my favourite parts of Terrifier 3. Art actually gets a sidekick in this one, and this is set up during this particular portion of the film. So it's Victoria, who I believe was a character from the first movie, not the one who was sawed in half. But she's like a demon in this. But I love how they've done her makeup. It looks absolutely phenomenal, actually. And I love her random behaviours throughout this film, how she just cuts herself with knives at points, and she kills herself in the bathtub and then just comes back to life almost straight away. It's always risky when you introduce a sidekick and put them alongside a horror icon. There are times in horror where it's been done very well, like Maniac Cop 2. And there are times when, to my mind, it hasn't been done so well, like in Bride of Chucky. For me, that is where the Child's Play franchise takes a bit of a dip. But I know I'm probably on my own with this, because Bride of Chucky is quite a popular one. But I'm pleased to say that in Terrifier 3, it really works giving Art a sidekick. And I think the reason it works so well is that Victoria, or Vicky, she's not in all of this movie. She's not dominating the space. She comes and goes from the film, weirdly, but I think that was a smart choice, because you've got to give Art time to breathe on his own. I just hope that they don't bring Victoria back in another film after this. I think she's fine for this one film, a good unique character for Terrifier 3, but leave it there. We don't need any more of her. But in terms of the story for this, it's very simple. So once Art gets his head back on, he goes after Sienna from part 2 and basically kills everybody in his way, and that's all you get, and as it happens, all you need. Damien Leone said coming into this that he wanted to take it back to being dark and gritty like the first movie and move away from the more fantastical elements of the second film. I definitely approve of the sentiment, although I think Leone has only been partially successful with that, because once you turn the character undead, which is what definitely happens at the end of the first one, you can't really go back to what this was initially, with just this guy in a clown costume walking around this industrial estate at 11 o'clock at night. I mean, that was freaky stuff that felt very real world. But this third film starts out with Art running around without a head. You can't get that same feeling back again. I can draw some parallels between this franchise and Nightmare on Elm Street. So with the original Freddy film, it was a really pure horror experience. Freddy hadn't become this comic character yet. And then in the second one, it went off in a weird direction with Freddy's Revenge. And then with part 3, Wes Craven came back into the fold and tried to take it more back towards what it had been originally, but he could only sort of half do that because the character Freddy had by this point already started to outgrow the franchise. His character was becoming well established. The quips were coming in, So what you end up with in Dream Warriors is this film which is sort of half like the original film, and the other half has its foot planted firmly in the future, and with what you see in Dream Master and beyond. I mean, it's still an excellent film, Nightmare 3, but the same thing kind of happens with Terrifier 3. You've got this film which is half really grimy and murky and dark, just like the first one, and then the other half of it is this jovial carnival ride where we're all laughing and grinning at what Art the Clown is getting up to. But I like that. This strikes a fairly nice balance for me, although there's another part of me which would like to see another film like that original, minus the saw kill. I just don't know how they would do it at this point, unless they maybe did like a prequel. Terrifier 0, anyone? Where Art goes back to being a human again. Maybe that's something to think about for the future when the ideas run dry. There's certainly lots of gore in this, as you would expect. It's very splattery. I'd say it's slightly more gory than the first two movies, but not by a lot. I noticed that the press have written loads of articles about Terrifier 3 in the last fortnight or so. There's the whole thing about, somebody barfed on the first night, and then the questions are asked, has Terrifier 3 gone too far, and so forth. But to be honest, it all feels a little bit half-hearted from the press these days with stuff like this, and everything that's been written about Terrifier 3, it's nowhere near the outrage that was out there when Child's Play 3, for example, came out all those decades ago. And the weird thing is Child's Play 3 is a toothless movie now. You watch it and you think to yourself, Jesus, where's the violence? So that in itself just shows you how attitudes among the punters and the journalists have changed over time. There is a thing when it comes to child violence in this film. Some kids get killed, and it's not all at once either. It's kind of spread throughout the movie. Every now and again in this, a child somehow randomly gets killed. But the clever thing is you never actually see it. It's never on camera, and that's why this film never becomes offensive. One of the things that I remember the most from going to the cinema over the past few years is watching Doctor Sleep, which is not a violent film on the whole, but there's this one scene where this child has his soul sucked out of him by vampires, and this kills him. There's no blood in the scene, really, from what I can recall, but just the fact that you can see the child's anguish and his upset as he's dying, that had a bit of an effect on me, and I always remembered it from that day forth. But you get nothing like that in Terrifier 3. I remember I was walking home from watching this, just thinking to myself, well, regardless of whether the child kills push the boundaries, I'm not going to have to watch any more child kills for another few years till the fourth one comes out. But then lo and behold, literally 2 nights later, I just happened to throw on Assault on Precinct 13, the John Carpenter original, and after about 5 minutes, a 10-year-old girl gets shot through her ice cream, through her heart, dies on the sidewalk, and I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, this is like peak era Carpenter, and I've just seen something way more offensive than anything I saw in Terrifier 3. So I don't think anybody should be overreacting to this movie or anything in the Terrifier series, really. This film especially, it's borderline comic book horror. It's too far removed from the real world to get offended by it. I've got to give some special praise to Lauren LaVera, who turns in a fantastic performance once again as Sienna, and this is not a role that you can just dial it in for like 2/3 of the movie because the boogeyman isn't showing up until the third act. This character is experiencing very deep trauma from the previous film, so from the minute she's on screen here, she's got to be absolutely on it in terms of her acting, and boy does she deliver. It's crazy to think that this actress started out as Anna Taylor-Joy's stunt double on a movie like 8 years ago when she was already into her 20s, but she's well on the way now. You'd hope that she's got a golden future in acting ahead, even beyond Terrifier. I do worry that they might overuse the Sienna character in subsequent sequels. I mean, at what point do you call time on the whole Sienna versus Art thing? I wonder if they might be sensible to make the next film Sienna's last, maybe, and just restrict it to a Tommy Jarvis style trilogy of appearances. But I'm not writing the movies, what do I know? Art the Clown, played by David Howard Thornton. He's even better here than in the previous ones. The actor, he's got this part down pat at this point, and there were 2 or 3 times when the people in my cinema screening were just laughing at his antics and his various gestures. There's one moment where this girl says, "I don't want to fuck Art the Clown," and like he's hiding behind a door going, oh. Really great stuff. I loved all the attempts at humour in this film. They absolutely land for the most part. So I guess at the end of it all, the question I've got to ask myself is this the best of the Terrifier movies? And I don't know, it's close between 2 and 3. I'm not going to do a ranking until there's another film out. I'll wait until there are 5 Art the Clown films, I suppose, but this is definitely one of the best, if not the best, in the series, and I'm predicting right now that this will turn out to be the peak of Terrifier. I've just got this funny feeling that we're going to turn a corner after this and there'll be some kind of backlash. Maybe there'll be a weaker sequel and there'll be some genuine criticism that comes this franchise's way. It happens with every franchise. You know, Terrifier is not going to be bulletproof. I think that's part of the reason why Leone has come out with these comments, like he just wants to make one more and wrap it up, and then if other people want to come along and dig Art out of the ground like it's Jason Lives all over again, then that's nothing to do with him. But it is inevitable at some point. You can't keep making films as great as this, because I'd say this is a great movie. It's not entirely my style of horror, because there's a massively heavy emphasis here on the gore and the spectacle and just having a good time watching people butchered. I tend to prefer a lot of atmosphere in movies, things like The Conjuring and, some of the darker moments of Halloween where Myers is just stalking around and you don't know where he is. That's something that's a little bit lacking in this film that actually you did get in the first Terrifier movie. You know, that first one, there were girls walking around this warehouse and you're not sure if Art's going to pop out from anywhere, but you don't really get that with part 3. The kill scenes are set up very early. You know what's coming. Like Art will come along, walk into a certain situation, you think, right, we're going to have a kill scene now somehow. We might have a bit of banter first, but we know what's coming. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more where characters are just going around the uni campus or the shopping mall and we don't know when Art's going to pop out. Maybe they can readjust that with future films once again, but nevertheless, I had a fantastic time with this. I could absolutely go back to the cinema and watch this a second time tomorrow. It was that good. Very, very impressed with it. So normally at this point in the review, I would show you my version of the film that I've just reviewed, but obviously I don't own this. It's still on at the cinema, but I am planning to buy all 3 Terrifier movies on Blu-ray. Currently, I own none, but I will probably get them all at the same time before Christmas, I think, and go through the whole franchise again. I definitely need to make peace with the first one, and I think I can. The second film was brilliant, and yet I've already started to forget so much about it, so I'd love to rewatch that one again. And the third one, I could watch that right now, even though I just watched it on Sunday. I have now definitely become a fan of this franchise. Right, shall we get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score we're going to give this? So I've got 1, 2, 3... 4 bloody axes out of 5. I was very torn on whether or not I should go to 4.5. And I think the only reason I didn't is simply because of that issue with there maybe not being enough stalking to go with the slashing. But still a great film. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thoroughly recommend it if you haven't seen it. Right, no reading update today. I've been a little bit slow with my reading this week. I'm still not even halfway through Alien 3. Hopefully in time for the next review, I will have finished that book. But for now, until next time, have a Terrifier Christmas. Goodbye.